I'm James Lynch, and this is my stock report for UFC 314, taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from the event. In a rare situation where, for this stock report today, I'm going to go a tie for the number one spot for Stock Riser. And you guys may disagree with me on this, but I'm going to explain why in a second here. But to me, this is a tie between Alexander Volkanovski and Paddy Pimblett. Now, look, there's two different ways you can look at this, but I think both their stocks really rose. We'll start first with Volkanovski because he was in the main event. Volk's stock rose because look at the optics if he would have lost a third straight fight. It would be, he's done, he's got to retire, it's over. The fact that he won a title, which in itself makes him a big stock riser on this card, it's the fact that his career can go longer and can go in the right direction here. A third loss would have been devastating for Volk's career. It would have been very tough. Credit to him. He put on a vintage performance. Dana White, you heard him at the presser. He was glowing about Volk's win over here. Fought a really dangerous guy, Diego Lopez, who really didn't have a ton to lose if you think about it. Lopez has only been in the UFC for a couple fights. Gets this great opportunity here. He's dangerous. We've seen him finish fights. Volk has to get mentioned here. But on the flip side, and this is why I'm giving them both the top spot, Paddy Pimblett destroyed Michael Chandler like there's no other way to put it. He finished Chandler. He beat Chandler worse than Charles Oliveira did. Charles Oliveira took him to a decision. Paddy Pimblett finished him in the third round. Did it via TKO too. Like if you thought Paddy was going to win, you're thinking, it's probably going to end up being a submission win. He gets it done that way. Paddy's coming into his own right now. And the thing with Paddy is he comes with that star power. The UFC was hoping Paddy would have turned out this way. And I remember after the Jared Gordon fight, a lot of us were thinking, Paddy's really not that guy. He should have lost to Jared Gordon. He's barely scraping by these fights. After that fight, something changed. We saw, obviously, the Bobby Green win. Actually, I think he fought Ferguson after. And then it was basically after the Ferguson fight, things had changed. He gets the quick win over Bobby Green. And then tonight, this really propels him up here. So I have a hard time saying one is better than the other because, again, Volk lets his career go on longer. He wins back his title. Paddy, though, he's really been the talk of this card. That was a very good win over Michael Chandler here. So I'm putting them both in the number one spot. We won't have a number two this week, but they definitely both have to get the biggest stock riser on this card equally, in my opinion. The third biggest stock riser on this card for me, it's got to be Dominic Reyes. Underdog. Yes, he was on the two fight win streak, but realistically, that last fight against Anthony Smith, that was more about Smith, not really his head being in the game here. To take out a guy in Krylov, who has had quite the resurgence since coming back to the UFC, who's on a good win streak coming into this, right? He had a couple, 3 straight wins here, including a guy in Ryan Spann who Reyes had lost to. This was a very good win here for Reyes, and he's now in that conversation of the contenders in the weight class. This was the win that he needed. It's funny. There was a lot of people who, after losing to Ryan Spann, people are like, it's probably time for Reyes to retire. This story is not going to end well. And here he is now, 3 straight wins. He's back in the driver's seat as far as a contender in the weight class. Very big win from there. I suggested booking the Carlos Ulberg fight. I know people would argue that maybe Ulberg's done enough, but it's most likely going to be Ankalaev Pereira next. Ulberg's going to have to wait anyways. These two were scheduled to fight. That'll be a real test because Ulberg's got some serious knockout power. I'd like to see Reyes and Ulberg next. Huge win there for Dominic Reyes. He's got to be the third biggest stock riser. Now, we got a couple honorable mentions because, again, there's a lot of different ways you could have gone on this card when it comes to stock risers. You have to mention John Silva. Dominant performance against Bryce Mitchell. And the most impressive part was John Silva. It's like if you would have come to me after this card and said John Silva won by stoppage, I said, yeah, no kidding. Big deal. He was supposed to do that. It's the fact that he won by submission. The fact that John Silva is now showing that he's also got a ground game, that he goes against a guy who's very talented on the ground in Bryce Mitchell and submits him, to me speaks volumes of how good John Silva is. This guy's the real deal. A little bit worried about the weight cut. He did make it this time, but it was iffy. He's got to get that under control. This guy looks legit. Finished Bryce Mitchell in dominant fashion. He could have easily been number 3 on this list. The reason I put Reyes ahead of him is just because I think Reyes is closer to title contention than John Silva is right now. This is a good win for Silva. It's also his first ranked win. He needs more wins like this. With Reyes, he's gone on a bit more of a streak here. So, again, we could talk about optics and all that stuff, but that's kind of where I'm going there. The other honorable mention has to be Verna. She gets the win over Yan Shonan. I think people expected that. It's just the fact that Verna now has to get a title shot. Now, is that going to be against Weili Zhang? We'll see. There's talk about Zhang moving up. I know the UFC isn't fond of champions keeping their belt, so Zhang might have to vacate. Maybe it's Verna against someone else. I don't know. Maybe do the Mackenzie Dern rematch for a title. We'll see. We'll see what ends up happening here. But Verna close to a title shot. She's got to be a big stock riser because she's in title contention now. And this one may not be popular with people, but I'm going to throw it out there. I think Diego Lopez's stock went up tonight. Look, I know there's people picking him to knock out Volk. He still went 5 rounds with him. He still landed some good shots on Volk. There's questions about Lopez's cardio. I think that was solved tonight. He can obviously go 5 rounds. He had good takedown defense in this fight. I think there's a lot of positives there. I think if anything, yeah, he didn't win the belt, but Lopez, he's 30. He's in the prime of his career. I think there's a lot of promise there. I don't think his stock went down. I know people, I know sure there's a lot of people who bet on Lopez to win by stoppage. It didn't end up happening here, but the fact that he went out there and, went 5 rounds with Volk, I think speaks volumes. Good for Lopez. He's going to get an honorable mention as a stock riser. I think his stock did go up tonight despite losing the fight. Okay, let's get to stock droppers. Not going to spend a ton of time on this, but biggest stock dropper on this card. I fooled you with the thumbnail here. It's got to be Michael Chandler. Just a lopsided loss. This is a guy who waited out for Conor McGregor, ends up coming back to fight Oliveira, gets dominated in that fight, and then he gets dominated by Paddy, and he's 38. Like, if Chandler wants to keep fighting, the only way the UFC is going to let him continue to fight is if he's fighting up-and-comers. So they're going to use other guys to build a name off of him, and the way he looked tonight, Chandler does not look even like a top 10 lightweight at this point. He looks like he's done. He was bleeding. Like, I said it on Dennis's stream tonight on Submission Radio. I did the watch-along. I'm like, Chandler's done. Like, he's not going to win this fight. He's going to get finished. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, he gets finished. Father Time catches up to everyone. Chandler didn't have that pop that I thought he would in this fight. Like, I thought maybe he'd clip Pimblett. That didn't seem to be a factor at all. Chandler is at a he's not at a crossroads. I think he's pretty much close to retirement at this point. So I think he probably will fight again, but 38, what do you got to prove at this point? You're not fighting for a title. He can't keep losing fights like this, though. If he has one more fight and he looks like this, it's not going to end well. He's lost 3 in a row. He's actually, his UFC record now is 2-4. Not looking good for Chandler here. So he's the biggest stock dropper by far. However, you could also make a case for this guy, who is the guy in the thumbnail, and that's Nikita Krylov. Now, look, I have a bit of sympathy for Krylov. Okay. A lot of factors in this fight that weren't working in his favor. He's coming off a serious shoulder injury. He's coming off a huge layoff. He was supposed to fight Azamat Murzakanov back in November. That fight gets canceled because Murzakanov ends up failing a test. So he hasn't fought since March of 2023. So he's been out for almost 2 years, more than 2 years. So that sucks. So I get that part of it. It's just the optics of it. 3-fight win streak. Had he beat Reyes, we'd be talking about him fighting like an Oldberg or someone like that. Now he goes back down a couple notches and he's in a tough spot. Maybe now's the time you do Krylov and Jan Blachowicz. They both are coming off losses. That could make sense. But Krylov, stock dropper for sure. He was a favorite in this fight. People were picking him to win. I didn't see many people picking Dominic Reyes. So Krylov, stock dropper for sure. Another stock dropper, again, he was not supposed to win tonight, but it's Bryce Mitchell, and it's the fact that Mitchell's now been finished in 3 of his last 4 fights. It's not looking good for Bryce. I really don't know where he goes from here. We know all the stuff outside the cage. We're going to kind of ignore that. Sorry, my bad. He's been finished in 3 of his last 5 fights. Still not good optics, though. The losses are looking really bad. The wins, I'll give him the Ige win, but the Kron Gracie fight, that was like a gimme fight, basically. Kron Gracie's barely UFC caliber. He's 30. What you see is what you get with Bryce. I don't think he's going to make some sort of crazy turnaround here. I think Jean Silva just is that good, too. I think Bryce Mitchell fights like a Julian Erosa. It could be a winnable fight for him. No, nothing against Julian, but you know what I'm trying to say here. I think he's been fighting some really tough guys, but I think this was tough. It's the way Bryce lost. If Bryce loses a decision, he loses a close fight, feeling a little bit better, but it's the fact now that he's been finished in a bunch of these fights. It's not looking good for him ever being a contender. Let's do some honorable mentions here quickly. Patricio Pitbull didn't have a ton of hype. I really actually don't know a single person who picked Pitbull going into this fight. It's just the optics of it that, if Pitbull, let's say he made this fight a little bit closer. Let's say he did win this fight. I mean, there would have been huge opportunities ahead, but even Dana White made a comment, maybe he had jitters. I don't know. I think Pitbull's too small for 45. Might be worth looking at bantamweight. But it's just tough for him because he's so old. So Pitbull's got to be a stock dropper. Not that he had a ton going in because, like I said, people weren't expecting him to win. This one's a tough one to put on here, but I feel for Sean Woodson. I thought that was a bad stoppage, but also Sean wasn't in the best position. But you look at the fact that Woodson hadn't lost a fight. How long was it? He was on a crazy win streak here, right? He had what? He was undefeated since 2020, and now he loses a controversial fight. That sucks. And the judges did have him behind too. You got to mention Woodson as a stock dropper just because of the win streak. And Darren Elkins needs to retire. That was a tough way to see him get finished in this fight against Julian Erosa. He's just a stock dropper in terms of that could be his last fight. I mean, you start getting finished like that, nobody's going to want to see a fight. So there we go. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Give me your top 3, bottom 3 stock risers. Let's make it easy, and we'll have a debate about that. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, at Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. I see I have the wrong graphic up on here. It should say stock report. You know what? I'm going to switch this. Actually, no, I'm not going to have time to switch it here. But this is supposed to be the stock report. It shouldn't be saying reaction, but we'll keep it there anyways. Hope you guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you guys soon.